Well, color me surprised. Diablo 4 doesn't suck on release and is actually a pretty good game. I was so ready to jump on Diablo 4 bashing everything about it, but boy did this game prove me wrong. This is indeed a very, very rare Blizzard W, and I say this because to be honest, I don't like Blizzard. I think that they are currently the scummiest video game publisher on the market, and they just keep getting into drama after drama. Now, my disdain for this company didn't just happen overnight. I've played multiple Blizzard games for hundreds of hours over a very long span of time. I've played Diablo 3 for hundreds of hours when Reaper of Souls came out. I bought Overwatch 1 the day it came out in May 2016, and I was there spamming competitive during the peak of the game. I was even a hardcore Heroes of the Storm player when it was in its prime. So I was at one point a Blizzard fan, but during that time, something's changed internally at Blizzard, and they've just been making terrible decision after terrible decision. Like canceling the Overwatch 2 PvE, even though that's literally the whole reason why they marketed the 2 in the first place. Or releasing Diablo Immortal with the most greedy monetization tactics I've seen for a mobile game. Or releasing Warcraft 3 Reforged in the horrible state that was in on launch. And that's only for the games. Don't even get me started on the stuff that happens in the office, like the breast milk drama. The list of reasons goes on, and I eventually just became jaded to all of this. And I'm not afraid to admit that I am a Blizzard hater, but at this point, can you really blame me? They're one of the most greediest and soulless publishers in the gaming industry. I'm surprised anybody still supports Blizzard at this point, because it seems like Blizzard can't go 1 month without pissing off their fans. So when Diablo 4 was announced, I was skeptical about it because I'm thinking to myself, how will Blizzard mess it up this time? And so far, Diablo 4 has made me eat my words because they've started off extremely strong, even though there are some hiccups here and there. But overall, even though I have a negative bias on anything Blizzard touches with their money-hungry fingers, Diablo 4 just has that Blizzard quality to it, whatever that means nowadays.
But unfortunately, the effort required to pull all of that together into a Blizzard quality experience that we can ship to you is huge. To a Blizzard quality experience, to a Blizzard quality experience, to a Blizzard quality experience, to a Blizzard quality experience.
I'm actually impressed that Diablo 4 managed to deliver on the expectations that were set by it before launch and just give us a pretty good high quality ARPG experience. Now, this game isn't the perfect ARPG out there. In fact, it has a lot of problems, many of which comes from the performance. This game has more stutters than Timmy from South Park.
I am a level 10 bard, and with my loot I shall power up my elven guards with magical songs of enchant.
Pretty much every 30 seconds of gameplay would either result in a stutter or freeze from the game, and this would happen at any moment and at any time. The game would even stutter when I'm in a solo instance with literally no one else around. And it would freeze in the absolute worst situations, like in the middle of a difficult enemy encounter. I can't count how many times I've died to a pack of mobs due to the game freezing up at the most crucial time. This was extremely frustrating to play because not only do I have to worry about surviving a pack of elite mobs, I also have to worry about whether or not the game would freeze in the middle of a fight. And I feel like a lot of this problem stems from the fact that this game is an always online shared world multiplayer experience. Now, I usually don't have a problem with always online games. This is an MMO after all. But I do start to have a problem with it when the service cannot handle the load and it actively makes the gaming experience worse. There are also some server-side issues like rubber banding and the occasional disconnect. And it was just so frustrating whenever I would run into an elite pack, then get hit with a disconnect and end up dead afterwards. I can't even imagine how infuriating this game must be trying to play on hardcore because you can just die to something outside of your control. I've seen so many people lose their hardcore characters because they disconnected for a second during an intense moment.
Desconectado. O servidor. Alô? Você não tá aqui não. Não, tá aqui sim. Nossa, tu vai morrer, mano. Tá com metade da vida. Ai, ficou vermelho embaixo dele.
Nossa, que...
Multiple hours of gameplay and hard work just gone because of a little hiccup on Blizzard's end. It's such a cruel fate that I wouldn't even wish this upon my worst enemy. But this issue will probably get fixed a few months from now, and hopefully Blizzard can fix the performance issues sometime in the future as well. Diablo 4's graphics are some of the best I have ever seen for an ARPG game. The absolute visual fidelity for this game is beautiful. Of course, it is expected that a billion-dollar company would spend an obscene amount of money making their game look visually stunning. This destitute and bleak world of Sanctuary ironically feels alive and looks really vibrant. The textures of each of these areas are extremely high quality, and each of the areas in the world are visually diverse with their own theme and atmosphere. From the cold tundras of the Fractured Peaks to the hellish desert wastelands of Kyrgyzstan to the putrid swamps of Hawazar. There was just so much visual diversity in this world that it was always so exciting for me to explore the world and find new places that I've never seen before. It's actually pretty impressive for an ARPG to make me pause my dungeon crawling in order to just take in the sights and admire the views. The only other ARPG to make me do this was Lost Ark for similar reasons. And not only is the world so beautiful to look at, but the character models are also really detailed. Whenever the camera zooms in on the characters' faces, you can just see how much work has been put into making these models look so realistic, especially in the amazingly well-crafted cutscenes that had me glued onto my screen the whole way through, every time without fail. This game is extremely cinematic with so many cool set-piece moments and cutscenes that made the whole story so enjoyable. The opening section for this game is one of the best openings I've experienced for an ARPG. From the setting, the tone, the atmosphere, it's all masterfully set up in order to fully engage the player with the story. The Diablo 4 devs put a great amount of effort into immersing the player within the world of Sanctuary. It really makes us feel like this is a dark and hopeless world that we're living in, and I love it. This is quite literally the Blizzard quality that Blizzard is known for. Every time they have a cinematic, they absolutely knock it out of the park without fail. It happened with the Overwatch cinematics, and now we see it here again in Diablo 4. So props to the Blizzard art and animation department for once again carrying this greedy company and keeping them relevant. Surprisingly, the story in Diablo 4 is actually really good. It's surprising to me because Diablo is, of course, an ARPG, which is a genre that's not really known for telling compelling stories and more so just leaning more towards the hyper sweaty min-maxing aspect of it. But my god, when I booted up the game for the first time and was introduced to that opening cinematic, I was immediately hooked. It just did everything perfectly. It introduced the main villain really well, it set the tone for the story going forward, and it got me interested in the game's lore. Diablo has always had some deep and interesting lore, and Diablo 4 has just massively expanded its universe. The story is basically that Lilith, the daughter of Hatred, has been summoned to Sanctuary in order to build an army of loyal followers that would help her destroy the high heavens and burning hells so that she would become the sole ruler of Sanctuary. So now it's up to you and your companions to stop Lilith and save Sanctuary. I really liked how they've handled the story in this game and just how much involvement your character has within it. Like I said before, the cutscenes are amazingly well crafted. Not to mention that this game is extremely cinematic with so many memorable moments in the story, which just helps so much in immersing me within this world. But what I really liked about them was how involved your character is within the story. Your character, the Wanderer, is surprisingly really talkative and actually has a lot of dialogue with the other characters in the story. And it's so cool to see the character that I created having a dialogue with each of the other characters. It really makes me feel like the Wanderer isn't just some blank face that the NPCs give random side quests to while they stand there in silence. And some of these side quests are really good. Of course, there are those throwaway ones where you just have to go kill X amount of guys, but the really good ones have their own unique storylines and their own little quest chains. I would say that some of these side quests were just as interesting as the main story at times. Like this one quest line that starts off with me helping a woman pick flowers for her sick mother, which is pretty sweet of her. Then when we make it back to her mother, she just starts flipping out and goes on a tirade about how she regrets giving birth to her daughter because she's a demon spawn and that she's ever only brought misfortune. It was super messed up, but it kept my attention. Then it all devolves from that point, and the villagers accuse us of practicing demonic arts, lots of deaths happen, and so on. There were just so many side quests in this game that captivated me the whole way through, and it just goes to show how good the writing in this game is. If you're a casual campaign enjoyer like me, you'll find that there's a good amount of story content here. It took me a good 30 or so hours to complete the campaign and most of its side quests, which is actually a lot of time for a game like this. And then add on the end game progression and you'll be playing this game for a very long time. Diablo 4 has a really good open world. It was really fun taking my time to look around and see the many sites that this game has. There are 6 different regions in Sanctuary and each of them are completely different from each other visually. And what I really like about what the developers did here is that they've made exploring this world and doing side activities rewarding with a renown system. This is a sort of regional reputation bar that rewards you for doing side activities around the map, like completing dungeons, doing side quests, and liberating strongholds. And once you've collected enough renown points, you get some really good rewards that massively help you out in your playthrough, like a skill point or an extra potion. It's an intuitive system that makes exploring Sanctuary much more interesting and enjoyable. There is one downside to the system, however. I've heard that renown and map progress does not carry over to your other characters. So if you want to play a different class, you're going to have to re-farm your renown bar every single time. And that just really sucks because renown isn't something that I would like to do over and over every time I want to play a new class. It's fun to do the first time around when everything's new, but it's absolutely dreadful when you have to repeat the process for the millionth time. Hopefully Blizzard changes this because it just feels awful to make a new character and have to do everything again. What also makes Sanctuary so fun to explore is the seamless open world co-op. As I mentioned earlier, Diablo 4 is an MMO with a shared world, which means you can see other players running around the map while you're out and about. And there are these world events that you can participate in with other random people who just happen to pass by. It's kinda cool at first that you can do world content with other random people in the game, but after a while they got repetitive and I ended up skipping over them altogether. And speaking of repetitive, I found that the dungeon design in this game got stale really fast because of how the layouts and objectives were. What I mean is that the dungeon layouts in this game are filled with multiple long branching corridors that lead to dead ends, and the objective would usually be destroy or find the 3 things, then you can kill the boss. The problem with this is that it comes with a lot of backtracking. Whenever you hit a dead end on one path, you gotta do the slow, boring walk to the other side of the dungeon so you can find the objective, so you can open the door that leads to the 2nd floor so you can find the boss and kill it. Whatever happened to just finding the boss and killing it? It's obnoxious having to jump through so many hoops just to only spend about 10 seconds killing the boss. I don't know, this might be just a me thing, but because of this, I would dread having to do dungeons and pretty much avoided doing them. And like D3, you can run endgame dungeons with other people, which is pretty fun. But the annoying thing is that there's no matchmaking or LFG menu that I know of, so you have to seek out individuals who are running the same content as you are, then request an invite, then transfer to their world, then teleport there so you can do the dungeon or whatever, just to do it all over again. There's gotta be an easier way to implement this because it's just exhausting to do every single time. But my experience with this is limited because I mostly played solo anyway. Now another problem I had with this game's world is that the enemies in it scale to your level. Some people might be fine with this, but I personally am not because it makes it so that the same enemies will always have the same difficulty no matter what level I am. The problem with this is that it makes me feel like leveling up doesn't make me stronger. I don't feel like I'm becoming more powerful as I gain levels, and because of that, the game gets boring. In fact, it feels like I'm getting weaker as I level up because the mobs get harder to kill. I would have preferred it much more if each area had a set level range. That way, if a dungeon is ever too difficult, I can just grind to overlevel it and beat it that way. This way, it actually makes you feel like you're making progress and getting stronger. There are some benefits to scaling enemies though, like being able to play with other people of any level discrepancy and still feeling like you're contributing. Also being able to do content literally anywhere in Sanctuary and have it still be relevant to you is a really nice feeling for people who like to go off and do side content around the world rather than follow the main story. But even then, I think the negatives far outweigh the positives for this. Now of course, as you progress through the game and complete the story, You'll unlock higher world tiers, which increase the enemy difficulty throughout the map and adds more difficult affixes to random mob packs. I really like how the different world tiers don't just do a boring stat increase to the mobs, but actually add some affixes to the mob packs that make them way more interesting to fight. Like, once you increase to world tier 3, mobs that buff the others around it would start spawning, and obviously better loot drops from them. This is a pretty neat system to keep players interested in progressing through the game by giving more challenge to the more hardcore players. You also unlock a bunch of endgame stuff that you can do around the world, like Hell Tides, Nightmare Dungeons, and the Grim Favors, which all give you really good loot if you complete them. And there's even a harder version of the final boss that's level 100 if you want to go for that. I personally haven't really done too much of the endgame stuff because I'm not really interested in grinding forever. But if you're one of those people who like grinding, then there's plenty of stuff for you to do in D4's endgame that'll keep you playing for a very long time. I actually kind of have mixed feelings about Diablo 4's gameplay. On one hand, I think the core gameplay loop is fun and very satisfying to play once you're firing on all cylinders, and I really like how they've lowered the damage numbers from Diablo 3, so you're not doing trillions of damage anymore, and now you're only doing tens of thousands, which is much better visually. Diablo 4 really perfects that adrenaline rush when you kill a big pack of elite mobs. It's amazing how even though Diablo 4 is catered to a more casual audience, it still manages to have enough meat here for the hardcore players to really sink their teeth into. But unfortunately, when you're not firing on all cylinders, it feels really slow and unfun to play. And that's because the resource management in this game is really annoying to deal with. You see, every class has some sort of resource that they use in order to cast their main damaging skill, whether it be mana, fury, or energy. Each class has something that they spend in order to deal damage basically. The problem I had with this is that the resource consumption is way too high and the resource generation is way too low. My core damaging skill costs 30 energy and rogues only have a maximum of 100 energy. So that means I would only be able to cast my main damaging skill 3 times before I run out of energy and be forced to use my significantly weaker basic attack in order to just deal good damage again. Of course you have other skills on your hotbar, but they're on pretty long cooldowns. So once you've blown all your cooldowns and used up all your resources, you're just kinda in this awkward DPS downtime where you're waiting for everything to come back up so you can deal damage again. And this just makes extended fights where you don't kill the mobs in one rotation feel really bad. I might be in the minority here, but I'm really not a fan of this type of ARPG game design where you gotta use your basic attack in order to generate enough resource so you can spend it on a big damaging skill. Either give me more buttons on my hotbar to press, or lower the cost of the skill so I can use them more. Both of these solutions would vastly minimize the feeling of downtime while still letting players feel like they're doing good damage. Now all of this is coming from my limited leveling experience at level 53. Maybe it gets better at level 100, I don't know, but from levels 1 through 50, it just does not feel that good. Anyway, the classes in this game are great. Diablo 4 has 6 playable classes on launch, and each of them have their own unique playstyles for all types of players, like the barbarian, the sorcerer, and the rogue. What I really like about the classes are the wide number of builds that you can do for each individual class. For example, I went with a poison twisting blades rogue, and I've generally found a decent amount of success with it while leveling. I've seen other people go something way different from me, and I really like how pretty much every build is viable for each of the classes. And that's because the skill tree is really effective yet simple at the same time. Diablo 4's skill trees are very easy to understand, and they make up for that simplicity by having each of the big nodes give you something impactful. And I mean, after messing with Path of Exile's skill trees for over 1,000 hours, nothing can really compare to that. But it doesn't need to because it's catered to a way different audience. And even though Diablo 4's skill tree works for the casual player base, I would have personally liked a little more depth to the skill tree, like one more fork on some of the branches. But this is fine for what it is. Now what helps out with the large build variety in this game are the loot drops. The loot system in this game is pretty much the same as it was in D3, except this time unique items make a return since Diablo 2. The uniques are pretty much a tier above legendary items that are these powerful build defining pieces of gear with a very low drop chance. I really like that they've added items on a tier above legendaries because it gives players something to chase for. And some of the rare uniques have an added benefit of just being a really nice trophy to show off, like a headhunter belt in Path of Exile. Other than uniques, the other pieces of loot that you get are pretty neat. What I like about it is how simple the loot upgrades are. You pick up a piece of loot and see if it has a bigger number than what you're currently using. If it does, put it on. If it doesn't, salvage it. Done and done. You don't have to spend 30 minutes looking at each of the affixes in order to decide which piece of gear you want to put on. Just put on whatever has the bigger number and you're good to go. Now of course, as you reach the end game, you're going to have to pay attention to what you're putting on and optimize a little bit. But for most of the casual leveling experience, it's just plug and go, and I appreciate being able to spend more time playing the game rather than comparing numbers. However, the loot does suffer a little bit from stat bloat. What I mean is that some of the affixes for the gear feel unnecessary, like they were made just as filler. For example, a rogue has the damage with skill that swap to new weapons affix. What does this even mean? This is so specific. I didn't even know rogue had a skill that swaps weapons. Or the close, distant, injured, and healthy keywords. I'm not a fan of these, and it feels like they were just made to take up space whenever you reroll your affixes. That might be my personal taste, but I found it annoying whenever I rolled these keywords on my gear. Some of these keywords in Diablo 4 can be completely removed and the game would not be affected at all. Probably the biggest issues that Diablo 4 has are about the quality of life features in the game, or lack thereof. There are just a lot of questionable little decisions or missing things that the developers seem to have forgotten about. Like, why is there no dedicated gem bag? It's really baffling why the gems take up a whole inventory slot like a sword or a chest piece would. Is it really too much to ask for a separate tab for my gems? Especially since they always take up about 25% of my inventory. Also, there seems to be a lack of a search function. Like, if I wanted to search for movement speed, I would have to mouse over every item individually and look at each of the affixes until I find what I want. And this gets really annoying when you've got hundreds of items to look through. And the horse controls are really weird, like it moves slower the closer your mouse is to your character. Why is this a thing? Just have it run at full speed no matter what, and if you want to walk slow, just press a button for it. No need to be fancy here. Also, there are these really annoying barricades out in the open world meant to just block your path. So you gotta get off your horse, take the 2 seconds to break the barricade, and since your horse cooldown is 10 seconds long, you just end up standing there twiddling your thumbs till your horse comes off cooldown. Please just remove these barriers and make it so that the horse runs full speed regardless of your mouse position. There are also some smaller stuff that made the gameplay a little more obnoxious, like having no iframes on the dodge roll, or some of the enemy AoE effects being hard to see when there's like 15 different things going on and my AoE is covering up theirs. Also, a lot of enemies have some really unfun crowd control effects that immobilize you for about 3 seconds each time. And you can't do anything about it but just sit there and watch them slowly kill you. I can only imagine that getting CC'd in a World Tier 4 Nightmare dungeon would pretty much mean instant death. There shouldn't be so many enemies with hard CC as it just makes the game really unfun to play. Now of course Diablo 4 is a Blizzard game, which means that obviously there are going to be microtransactions even though this is a $70 game. And the sad part is that I completely expected Blizzard would do this, and I was right. After all, they are still a greedy, soulless, blood-sucking company. Diablo 4 has an extremely egregious cash shop with $25 skins that don't even look that good. And of course it has the premium currency packs that are pretty much standard in every game nowadays. And later on this game will eventually get a battle pass once the season starts. All this on top of paying $70 to $100 for the game itself. What's also pretty funny is that there's a $100 collector's box for Diablo 4 that doesn't even come with the game itself. You still have to buy the game separately after buying the collector's edition. Oh, I'm sorry, collector's box. They didn't even name it collector's edition because you don't even get the dang game. This is just so bizarre. Like, Blizzard always somehow finds new ways to squeeze more money out of its fan base, and it works. People will still buy this crap. But I mean, it's Blizzard. I can't expect them to not nickel and dime us for literally everything after the immense amount of success of Diablo Immortal. It would be simply stupid not to. I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. I have been in the past and I will most likely be in the future. As a former Blizzard fan turned jaded Blizzard hater, I was expecting Diablo 4 to be a disaster. And I mean, can you really blame me? Blizzard hasn't really been making the best decisions lately, and they've killed off a lot of their games that I really enjoyed in the past. I eventually just got sick of their BS and stopped playing their games altogether. So when I booted up Diablo 4 for the first time, I was ready to tear this game apart and call it the worst game ever. But to my surprise, D4 is actually a pretty fun game with a really good story. Obviously, this game still has issues that need fixing, but overall, this is a good game. Now, I'm still skeptical about D4 because Blizzard games have always been good on launch. It's how they maintain it that has me worried, because Blizzard games usually have their quality drastically go down years after release. It's not the quality of this game right now that I fear, it's what it's going to be in the future that I'm worried about. But only time will tell. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know down below and make sure to like, comment, subscribe for more reviews in the future. See ya.